everybody, happy Wax on Wednesdays. After working with the alcohol inks on the oil stick on the gel press plate, I really been wanting to try them out on my very favorite printing paper, which is the Hanshi rice papers. They feel so wonderful, and when they have encaustic added to them, they're pretty much my favorite thing in the world. And I wanted to figure out a really a delicate way. These papers, they look delicate, but they're really not the Hanshi rice paper, but they're very, very thin and beautiful. And I wanted to figure out a really delicate way to, really delicate look for them. And I wanted to use stencils for this, I knew. And wanted to figure out a way to get a good print that had the light faded feel of the oil stick, but yet the bright colors of the alcohol ink. And here you see the Hanshi rice paper. And that was a little bit, it took a little bit of playing with to get used to bring out a really good print, show those stencils, but also have that lovely faded sort of aged look that oil stick gives. And then, of course, it suspends that alcohol ink really well and keeps it wet for a couple minutes so you can work on it. But the challenge here was to get a really good print and show off that stencil in its entirety with some really beautiful colors. So here you're going to see me play around today and try and figure out how to get an excellent print, combining that oil stick and the alcohol ink and the stencil, and getting a really excellent print from it. And I'm going to leave a link to that Hanshi rice paper on the blog. All of the supplies for every single week are on the blog at sherryreplogle.com, and you can check those out at any time to see all the supplies that I used in the video each week, along with the full blog post for the video. And every single time I pull one of these prints, I'm tweaking the next one just a little bit and tweaking the method that I've done just ever so slightly so I can try and get a better print each time. And sometimes it's a matter of just playing around with your mediums, and in this case playing around with the mix of mediums, which is the alcohol ink and the oil stick, and all used with the stencil. So in the case of these prints, the oil stick is providing that lovely, beautiful, faded, muted background that looks aged. It's also suspending my alcohol ink there on the plate for me. So it's allowing the alcohol ink to stay wet, where if it just went down on the bare plate, it would dry almost immediately. But now with the addition of the oil stick, I have the ability to add more colors and more working time to sort of play around with this. So a lot of these techniques I've played around with for over the week, and you can see that I'm sort of spraying the alcohol ink on with the bottle, sort of dripping it randomly, and I'm not letting it spread like I did in the last 2 weeks. I'm using the brayer, but I'm using a very, very light hand with that brayer, and that's because I want to have that oil stick as the barrier. That oil stick is keeping my alcohol inks wet. It's suspending them on top of the plate. So I want to make sure that barrier remains. And the more that I brayer the gel plate with the rubber brayer, the more oil stick I'm picking back up back onto my brayer, especially with that alcohol ink. It starts soaking it back up. So I'm going in with a super light hand to spread those alcohol inks around with that brayer so I can retain as much of that oil stick barrier as possible. And here I'm playing around with whether I like the print more if I remove the stencil or if I print through the stencil. And I find in the end, you'll see, get sort of in a rhythm here and find that I like both. And when the prints start coming out more fluidly with this stencil, it's really wonderful. In the end, I had these wonderful bold prints with printing the paper on top of the stencil, and then these beautiful ghost prints after the stencil was removed. And if you put them in a book, they're just going to look beautiful together. The bold print and the faded ghost aged look of the ghost print. And so I sort of get it into a rhythm here, and you'll find when you do this, when you get to do this printing, it's just so addictive that you end up with this huge stack of papers. And this is especially true with the Hanshi papers. And I'm using about a quarter of each Hanshi paper. I've cut it into quarters so it saves you a little bit on money there in the printing using this 5x7 plate when you're experimenting. I'm only using a quarter of each sheet, but you'll find that you quickly have this huge mound of beautiful papers printed on this Hanshi paper, and they can be added to an encaustic. They're very thin, so they can be added to an encaustic collage on board later on. They can be framed. I wax them, and if you'd like to see how I wax these Hanshi papers on the Patreon page this week, the bonus Wax on Wednesday video has how I wax and add encaustic to these Hanshi papers. So if you haven't joined me yet on the Patreon page, the Busy Bee level is the Wax on Wednesday level for the bonus Wax on Wednesday footage. So every week you'll get either bonus Wax on Wednesday footage or slowed down video, so you can see perhaps if I'm painting a landscape, you want the slowed down version, something like that, something fun, and an extra video, extra bonus footage, extra commentary, all on the Patreon page for Wax on Wednesdays. So it's more Wax on Wednesdays fun. And I had a lot of fun with this Patreon page. There's 4 different levels to choose from right now, and more levels to come soon. And the 4 different levels, every single level has a certain some benefit that you receive every single month, along with all of the benefits from the previous level. So it's really, really fun. It's like getting a mini workshop every single week. And for instance, the movers and shakers level, that level you receive every single Monday, you receive a warm-up video. When you come into your creative space, you get a fresh warm-up every single Monday, warm up with me. And I also give tips on how to carry that on throughout your week, throughout your creative week. So when you come into your creative space, you can really get started and get moving. And with that level, you also get all the benefits for the Wax on Wednesdays bonus videos. So you're getting like 2 mini workshops for that level every single week with me on Patreon. So I'm having a lot of fun with the Patreon channel, and I hope that you'll come over and check it out. I've got a link below this video so you can check out all those levels there on the Patreon page. And I'm getting happier with the way these prints are coming out, so I've moved up to about 3 different colors and also some gold. And I'm using both the Ranger alcohol inks and also the Pinata alcohol inks by Jacquard. And I'm just going back and forth. I love all the blues and greens in both sets, so I'm not partial to either. And I'm just sort of sprinkling the gold for just a little bit of a beautiful metallic effect on these. And you can see I've gotten into a rhythm now of having both the bolder print through the stencil and then that beautiful ghost print that comes out in that beautiful faded effect. So together, if you can imagine those in a book, waxed with encaustic added, and then in a book side by side, where you're viewing the bold print and then the ghost print that has that faded aged look. They're just beautiful together. So I hope you have as much fun playing around with these as I did. I wouldn't be surprised if the climate also had an effect on how much India ink to add, how much oil stick to add. You can see here in the video about how much I'm adding of each, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're in a dry climate versus a humid climate, if it affected how much the alcohol ink that needed to be added, for instance, how quickly the alcohol ink dries, and also the oil stick. So be aware that you want to just play around with this, and it's not hard to create a stack and have fun with these. So you'll quickly get addicted and carried away with these, no matter what, on these Hanshi papers. And if you love the way these Hanchi papers feel when you're printing with them on the plate, then you are going to be so excited when you dip these into the encaustic wax. They feel if delicious as possible to be a description for the feeling of a paper, then this is going to be it. They feel absolutely wonderful once they're dipped into encaustic, and I could barely wait until I finish this stack to get them over to the hot plate and dip them in the encaustic wax. I also used 3 of my favorite stencils from Stencil Girl products here in the video today, and I left the direct links for each of these 3 stencils over on the blog at sherryreplogle.com for the blog post for this week's video. So if you like the look of these stencils, then check out the links over there on the blog for this week's post. And because I was doing mostly blues and greens, I wanted to use some of my more organic stencils like this tree branch and the florals. And then of course, I can never get away from that circle stencil. That circle stencil has to be my favorite one. I've used it in so many videos on Wax on Wednesdays, but that one, I just love the little circle doodles. But the rest of them are like, for instance, this tree branch and the florals, and just something really organic since I was using all these blues and greens. So these beautiful Hanchi papers are originally used for calligraphy, so they're pretty sturdy, but yet they feel like tissue paper. And you can do so many things with them. You don't have to add encaustic wax to them. You can leave them as they are and add them, to collage or frame them as they are. But I'm telling you, dipped in encaustic wax, and not that I'm partial, but they feel absolutely wonderful dipped in wax. And you can go ahead and frame them. It's just a thin layer of wax. It's a very thin dip, and you can go ahead and frame them afterwards. You can add them to an encaustic work afterwards, or add them to a journal like I do oftentimes when I'm creating encaustic monotypes. So I hope you get a chance to play around with this Hanchi paper. It is available on Amazon, and I'll leave a link there on today's blog post for a direct link to find it. And it is just so wonderful to get these prints. It's such a delicate paper, and it pulls the prints so wonderfully. And here you can see all of the different prints and the ghost print along with it. So you can imagine it there in a wonderful encaustic journal. I hope that you really had fun with me today on Wax on Wednesdays, and we will see you next week. Happy Wax on Wednesdays.